William Carter, a millionaire and owner of the largest television network in the country, is humiliated live on air. His fiancée leaves him, in love with the artistic director. Seeking refuge, he finds Emily Johnson, a scavenger who hides secrets and a painful past. Amidst the trash and power, a love is born that can challenge the world. But will it be strong enough? Tell us in the comments which city you are watching from and rate this story from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very valuable. Leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more exciting stories like this. The light rain battered the east side neighborhood of New York City, spreading the aroma of wet earth and damp trash. Emily Johnson, with calloused hands and a face marked by daily struggles, protected her makeshift cart under a torn awning. Around her, the ground was a mosaic of papers, plastic, and forgotten scraps, remnants of the mansions that rose just a few miles away, where a lavish and distant life ran parallel to hers. She had no time for empty thoughts. Every lost minute meant less money for her sister Sarah's treatment. When the storm intensified, forcing her to huddle even closer, an unusual movement caught her attention. A tall man, soaked clothes, and a lost look, staggering among the debris. William Carter was there, far from the cameras and spotlights that had condemned him the night before. He had taken a deep breath, trying to shake off the humiliation of being dumped live on air when Sophia, his fiancée, announced their breakup to the world. In the arms of Michael Thompson, the artistic director who had been undermining his castle of power. Now, all he had left was to hide, fleeing from the ravenous press. Emily's eyes fixed on him with a confusing mix of distrust and surprise. She did not recognize that face of exhaustion and defeat, a face that carried both the weight of a luxurious past and a vulnerability that seemed foreign to someone who had always held the reins of their own life. Still, something subtle made her offer a helping hand, though her voice maintained a harsh tone, protective of a soul that had learned not to open up easily. "Lost, boss. There's nothing here but mud and abandonment," she warned, pulling him out of the muck with a look that brooked no argument. William took a deep breath, swallowing his pride, and accepted the gesture, feeling her rough hand, warm despite the cold. The unexpected closeness made them both realize the absurd distance between their worlds. The strong smell of burnt coffee, mixed with mildew, contrasted with the expensive fragrance he had always worn. "I need to stay out of sight today," he confessed, his voice low, almost a cry for help. Emily, despite the hardness she carried, did not turn away. With the speed that only experience could bring, she offered modest shelter, away from cruel eyes. "It's messy here, yes, but it's safe for those who don't have much more to lose. If you want to stay, you have to learn to get your hands dirty. This isn't a place for the faint-hearted." He watched her, his jaw tense, trying to absorb the image so far removed from his worlds of luxury and control. Under the tarp, the cold lessened. The sound of the rain, now gentle, now persistent, filled the silence between them. "You're different from what I imagined," he murmured, not quite sure if it was a compliment or surprise. Emily shrugged, and for a moment her eyes sparkled with a mix of challenge and hope. "Everyone thinks they know what other people's lives are like. I just live mine." The distant rumble of thunder made them both flinch, perhaps more from doubt than fear. Their hands remained close, the roughness of her skin invading his sensitivity in an unexpected way, breaking down the armor they both wore to survive. In the simplicity of the makeshift shelter, where the smell of wet earth and old pots traded places with the feeling of strange human warmth, William felt a tranquility he hadn't experienced in months. It was strange, it was uncomfortable, but for the first time there was a glimmer of something other than weakness. "I think I still don't understand how I ended up here," he said, his voice choked, broken by the weight of recent past. Emily, wide-eyed, gestured to the cramped space where she shared her life with Sarah. Some people's luck is the lack of options for others, and there's nothing in this world that can replace the feeling of having someone to care for, even if it's just for one night. As he settled his few belongings, William observed the simplicity of that place, the street kids running in the distance, the laughter that seemed like echoes from a world that didn't include him. Everything there faced precariousness with dignity. Everything there resisted. That night, under the veil of rain that was finally beginning to relent, an unexpected path began to open. Two worlds collided, one of power and money, the other of struggle and survival. And between them, the spark that could change the fate of both was born. William closed his eyes, feeling the aroma of wet earth mixed with hope, while Emily, by his side, kept her eyes fixed on the plastic curtain that separated the shelter from the street, determined not to let the outside world destroy what was beginning there. Unknowingly, they had started something greater than themselves, and at that moment when the past crumbled, where life seemed a tangle of pains and secrets, an unlikely love was germinating among the accumulated trash of the city and the dull shine of a millionaire's heart in crisis. William could hardly take his eyes off the modest yet vibrant activity of the recycling cooperative where Emily worked. 2 days had passed since that rainy night when he, a robust man, accustomed to the high society stages, had been welcomed by a recycling worker. Now, wearing simple clothes she had lent him, a worn-out pair of jeans and a top that did little to hide the shadow of his luxurious past. He walked among the wooden benches and forklifts, collecting patched bags and boxes, trying to appear natural while unable to hide the discomfort. Emily swept the floor with agile and determined movements, her dark eyes shining like headlights in the dim light of the cooperative. She noticed William approaching from behind, holding a crumpled paper bag. Inside were some homemade breads he had tried to buy at a nearby bakery. The gesture was different from what he usually did. There was no protocol, just the tense silence of someone trying to reconnect with the real world without losing themselves. "You didn't have to," she murmured, turning with an arched eyebrow and the crooked smile she reserved for uncomfortable situations. William shrugged as her hand brushed a blonde strand away from her face with a quick motion. "I just thought I could help. I can't just stay in my broken castle, right?" Emily chuckled softly, a sound that seemed unexpected in that environment, filled with heavy bags, voices, and the clanging of metal. "Castles here smell of dust and sweat," she replied, crossing her arms, a challenging look gleaming on her face. But there was something in her tone that William still couldn't decipher, a mix of pride and concealed hurt. He sat on a makeshift bench, resting his elbows on his knees, watching her hands that, although marked by labor, skillfully manipulated a bottle to separate glass from plastic. "Tell me," he asked, lowering his voice, seeking closeness, "how did you end up here?" Emily didn't like digging into the past, but she sensed something in his sincerity that made her sigh in resignation. "We survive, right? My sister, Sarah," the name weighed heavily on her lips, "is sick and needs expensive treatment. I gather what I can, what's left. Recycling, saving money, not giving up." William nodded, his face serious. "And they don't help?" "Who?" "The world. It never helped. We take the hits in silence, trying not to sink. But it weighs a lot." She gave a bitter smile that didn't reach her eyes. He looked down, feeling something strange tighten in his chest. He was finally deconstructing that idealized image of money and power as the solution to everything. "I didn't know," he confessed, his voice hoarse. "We live in my world, distant from the real reality. But that's no excuse." Emily stared at him, surprised by the unexpected humility. "Well, you should know. Some people prefer to close their eyes and pretend that trash, pain, and struggle don't exist." Before he could respond, a group of workers approached, pulling bags full of cardboard. Emily quickly got up to help, and William stepped back, trying to keep up without getting in the way. Throughout the morning, he tried to get his hands dirty, literally crushing paper, helping to sort recyclable materials, feeling the rough texture of the boxes, the smell of old paper, and the dust entering his lungs. Something completely different from the perfumed breeze of the glass offices where he spent his days. Emily watched him suspiciously, but couldn't help but smile at his persistence and genuine embarrassment in that new world. "You'll need to learn quickly," she commented, pulling him by the arm. "Here, there are no heels or ties that will save you." At the end of the shift, William walked her to the exit of the cooperative. The sky began to clear. Orange patches reflected in the puddles of rain. The simple routine, made of sweat, failures, and small victories, had a brutal contrast with the loneliness and grandeur of the afternoons he had left behind. Before saying goodbye, he made a gesture that surprised Emily. He took a napkin from his pocket and handed it to her, folded with a note inside. She opened the paper with trembling fingers and read quickly, "Dear Emily, thank you for teaching me the value of real struggle. I'll be back tomorrow to learn more." She looked at him, her eyes wide, her heart racing. She didn't know if it was gratitude or confusion. In her world, promises could just be words in the wind. William turned to leave, but stopped, feeling her eyes on him. "And don't be fooled," Emily warned, going back to collect her cart. "You're poor in the right way. You'll stumble, you'll make mistakes, you'll have to apologize, just like us." He gave a crooked smile, a silent challenge in his gaze. "I think I'll accept this crash course." As he walked away, Emily felt for the first time that this unlikely connection had the power to dismantle walls, challenge prejudices, and maybe, just maybe, transform their destinies. Even if neither of them knew yet how to navigate the turbulent sea that was the mix of pride, vulnerability, and hope. William avoided the cooperative the next day. In the glass and steel apartment he barely recognized as home, the phone insisted on an irritating symphony that he increasingly ignored. Hasty voices, emails with growing demands, deals to be closed, but in the back of his mind, only the heavy silence of emptiness echoed. The world of luxury and control around him could not fill the hole that had opened in his chest after that sweaty morning among torn bags and crumpled papers. At that same hour, on the other side of the city, Emily endured her fourth sleepless night, sitting beside the bed where Sarah fought for her fragile health. The room was filled with the mixed smell of medicine and warm sweat, and her gaze drifted over the medical bill, each number a silent dagger. The cramped, dark room seemed to swallow the hope she tried to keep alive with whispered words. "We won't." Emily shook her head. "Don't give up, Sarah. I'll find a way." But the path was winding, filled with dead ends that the system refused to illuminate. Tears welled up, and her hands trembled as she held the small cup of cold coffee she had forgotten on the side table. When the old phone, with its metallic and persistent ring, rang, Emily stood up, her heart racing. "Hello." The voice on the other end, hesitant yet purposeful, belonged to William. "Emily, it's William. I've been thinking a lot about you and Sarah. I want to try to help, to show you that I'm not just passing through this world you live in." She swallowed hard, surprised by his courage. "How did you get my number?" she asked, her voice thick with emotion. "Sarah's contacts led me here. I didn't expect to be so close to something real. I want to do things differently, Emily, but I need your help to understand everything." The pause that followed felt like a silent conversation between two worlds until her firm response came. "Then come soon. Sarah needs you, and time is running out." Days later, Emily wore simple, clean and neat clothes, something strange and almost uncomfortable for her, as she accompanied William on a community project from Carter Entertainment. It was a different dive, where he left the shine of high society to enter another reality, filled with faded colors, constant noise, and the earthy scent characteristic of the neighborhood's alleys. They walked through the narrow streets, observing the wooden and tin houses, the children playing barefoot amidst heaps of debris, and the strong aroma of home-cooked meals and sun-dried laundry. William seemed to absorb everything, his eyes wide and his hesitant steps revealing his immense distance from that universe. "Here, it's not just numbers, these are stories," Emily said firmly as she pulled the makeshift cart. At the Carter office, the battle continued fiercely. Sophia Lane used every inch of her influence to undermine William, her former fiancé turned relentless rival. With the help of Michael Thompson, the cunning and ambitious artistic director, she wove strategies to secure not only power behind the scenes, but also the public image necessary for her rise. In a tense meeting where clever smiles concealed cold plans, board members discussed William's temporary removal, reasons and consequences. Loyalty was a rare currency there, and the feeling of impending downfall followed him like a shadow. Isolated, weakened, but seeking a thread of hope, William found in Emily an unexpected bridge to the reality beyond the mirrors. During a break in the planning meeting for the community project, he noticed Emily leaning over, flipping through notes, her face serious yet focused. The formality of the environment contrasted with her simplicity, and he approached in a low tone. "Do you want me to explain? I know it's hard to understand what they're saying here." She looked up, her eyes shining despite her fatigue. "I've seen many people who talk beautifully but do nothing. I want to see something different." The smile he returned was laden with promise. That night, in a small house with thin walls that almost let the sounds of the community escape, Emily and William sat side by side, surrounded by the flickering flames of candles, the air thick with hope and distrust. "You've shown me a world I denied even to myself," he confessed, his voice thick with emotion. "Now I can't turn my back anymore." She squeezed his hand tightly, carrying all her pain and strength. "If we're going to change, we start by gathering what we have," she replied, her eyes fixed on him. There was no map or manual for this crossing of worlds, so opposite yet intertwined. However, there was a bond being forged, filled with strength, pain, tears, and a promise that, if well cared for, could break the barrier society insisted on erecting. For in the end, the storm that was forming was not merely the sum of summer rains. It was a hurricane of lives, interests, and hidden passions that threatened to topple walls, redefine destinies, and challenge all concepts. The beginning was uncertain, the struggle would be tough, but whatever came, they would not walk alone. William had not imagined that this decision could become a thin line between redemption and a definitive fall. In that meeting room, the mirrored walls reflected friendly and yet threatening faces, as the voice of the board members sounded firm and calculated. "We need to ensure the stability of the network," argued the board chair, a woman in a tailored suit with sharp eyes, who seemed to weigh each word as if they were valuable coins. "My proposal is that William steps back until the internal investigations are concluded. It would be prudent for everyone, especially for the investors." The room simmered. Other executives nodded, some with inquisitive eyes, others visibly uncomfortable with the idea of the young CEO's removal. Some saw it as an opportunity to reinforce their own power plans. Michael Thompson, with his elegant posture, clasped his hands under his chin, discreetly pleased with the possibility of turning the game in his favor. William, sitting in the shadows that surrounded him, felt the weight of loneliness digging into his back like knives. It was not just a crisis of image, it was an attack on what he considered the last bastion of control in his own life. But what he truly clung to was a different spark, the silent strength of Emily, that woman he had only met days before, but whose world seemed to bravely withstand its own storms. That morning, right after the meeting, he would go to the building of the non-profit organization linked to the community project from Carter Entertainment, where he knew her presence transformed the scene. Upon arriving, he saw Emily sitting in a simple chair, arms crossed, staring at her notes, the air in the place. The smell of fresh paint mixed with the sweet aroma of freshly brewed coffee, which the volunteers poured into worn mugs. The distant noise of children running through the hallways contrasted with the intense silence of the meeting room. "I know it's not easy," William whispered as he approached, his voice filled with a rare humility. Do you want me to explain things again? I know a lot of this sounds like a foreign language. Emily looked up and met his gaze. In her eyes was the perfect blend of exhaustion and determination. I really want to understand. More than just random words. I want us to do things differently. You know those promises politicians make? Well, she smiled somewhat bitterly. I want to see action, not just talk. He smiled back, sensing that there was more here than just institutional interest. Then let's do things differently, Emily. Together. The weeks that followed brought a new routine for both. In contrast to the rushed mornings, tense meetings, and forced smiles of executives, came afternoons immersed in the exhausting work of grassroots organizing. William discovered the weight of each decision, the bureaucracy, the insecurities that haunted those living on the edge of the system. Emily, in turn, began to see the suited individuals not as enemies, but as fragile human obstacles, also trapped in games larger than she could imagine, including her beloved William. On a rainy afternoon, the two headed to a community school that would benefit from the project. The place smelled of chalk, damp cloth, and uncelebrated birthdays. Children ran and laughed, while teachers made almost heroic efforts to maintain dignity in a setting marked by a lack of everything. I always wanted to study here, William confessed, kneeling beside a girl trying to write her name on a whiteboard. But I never thought my life could pass through here. Emily watched, her eyes brimming with a mix of sadness and hope. For us, this place is everything. Here live those whom the world has forgotten. Today, you are here. That's already a start, but the threats soon began to loom. Michael Thompson, increasingly audacious, used the hallways of the network to sow doubts in the ears of the board members, questioning William's sanity and ability to lead under pressure. We have to think about the company's image, Michael suggested in a candid conversation with a key investor, signs of drinking raising eyebrows in the management. A fragile CEO doesn't sell confidence. Meanwhile, the familiar distance began to weigh heavily. William's mother, Mrs. Carter, frequently called, full of fears and veiled orders for him to return to business instead of subjecting himself to this kind of charity work. One afternoon, after receiving a harsher call, William hung up without a word, his fist clenched until it hurt. "They will never understand," he told Emily later, locking eyes with her in a heavy silence. Never. But he was far from giving up. The connection with Emily deepened, becoming the refuge where his wounds could be seen without masks. Over a simple dinner, they shared stories and dreams, nurturing the fragile flame that was growing between them. On one occasion, during a walk through the cobblestone streets of the community, she held his hand in a gesture that seemed to say, "You are not alone." Then and there, under the warm light of the street lamps, with the distant sound of samba and hurried footsteps, they understood that mere willpower would not be enough. They would have to face the storm with their eyes wide open, together, relentless. In the coming months, they would be called to make decisions that would shake foundations, heal old wounds, and question everything they thought was immutable. Amidst this, love was born, stubborn and imperfect, a boat on a turbulent sea, navigating without a map, but filled with courage. The game was on. William and Emily had an agreement to face the world that had offered them different pains without denying their own vulnerabilities, ready to fight the many battles that life would throw their way, and perhaps to forever redefine the meaning of power, struggle, and belonging. William knew that time was not on his side. With each call that resonated on his cell phone, the pressure mounted, bringing with it the constant reminder of his family's overwhelming expectations, the investors, and the image he had been forced to construct over the years. Mrs. Carter was becoming an increasingly distant figure, caught between phone calls filled with veiled disapproval and pointed advice. "You need to take back control, William. This social project thing will make others think you've lost your focus," she said, her voice firm, cutting through the silence of the minimalist room in the penthouse apartment. He hung up the phone with a heavy breath, his fingers still trembling as if they had touched an invisible electric current. Thoughts consumed him in a whirlwind. He had lost his position, been humiliated in meetings, and now carried the weight of his family pressing him not to stray down a path that, for them, was a dangerous luxury. Yet there was a thread of light that shone faintly and steadily. Emily. That night, after a long day filled with spreadsheets, impromptu meetings at the non-profit, and complicated family matters, William found in her the refuge that his body and soul secretly craved. At a simple table covered with a patchwork cloth under the yellowed light of a flickering lamp, they shared a modest dinner made of rice, beans, and a bit of dried meat that Emily had bought at the market earlier. She looked at him with kind eyes, but filled with sincerity. "You know, William, I never imagined someone from your world could care like this. Or better yet, that you would be willing to face everything for something that goes beyond money." He let out a short laugh. "I didn't believe it myself before, but being here by your side makes me realize what really matters." She held his hand. With his hand resting on the table, the touch seemed to erase the distance between them. "Don't think this will be easy. Your world and mine have walls so high that we might end up trapped between them." He nodded, feeling each word as a challenge. "That's why we can't give up." In the following days, the relentless routine mixed difficult conversations, unexpected encounters, and the slow building of a bond that defied simple definitions. William accompanied Emily on visits to families supported by the project, observing the harsh reality she knew so well, the smell of wet earth, the chatter of children playing in the street, the wind carrying the sound of distant music. During one of these visits, they met Mrs. Thompson, who lived in a makeshift shelter next to a narrow alley, with walls covered in cracks and the smell of mildew clinging to the clothes hanging outside. The woman, with tired yet kind eyes, opened the door for them, offering burnt coffee, nearly sugarless, but made with love. "My daughter is sick, and without the right medicine, it will only get worse," Mrs. Thompson said, her voice choked with emotion. "If it weren't for you, I don't know where I would be." William learned there that his role was not to be a savior, but a piece in a complex web of solidarity and hope. In that environment, the weight of wealth lost its importance. What mattered was the restored dignity, the shy smiles of children beginning to believe in better days. This closeness began to generate unexpected reactions. In the office, Michael Thompson intensified his schemes, taking advantage of the situation to draw closer to allies and strengthen his position. In a strategic meeting, he hinted to skeptical board members, "The fragility of our CEO could be a real threat to the company. We need someone to lead with a firm hand." His voice laced with venom, he pointed to himself without hiding his ambition. Even old friends began to distance themselves, fearful of Fernando's potential downfall. But amidst this storm, Emily proved to be a silent force, a constant presence that did not waver in the face of difficulties and knew exactly when to offer a hug or a gentle reprimand. On a rainy afternoon, as they returned from a visit to a community near the south side of Chicago, Emily held his hand more firmly than usual. "I don't know everything that awaits you," she said seriously, her fingers intertwined with his, "but I know that together we can go further." He looked at her, feeling the mix of protection and vulnerability growing in his chest. "You taught me courage, Emily. If this is the first thing you give me, you can be sure I'll hold on to it to keep from falling." That sentence carried more than words. It was a promise built from glances, touches, and sleepless nights. A silent pact between two worlds that, until recently, seemed irreconcilable. The next steps would not be simple. There would be internal battles at Carter Entertainment, difficult investigations, possible betrayals, and the constant duel between hope and despair. But in every encounter, in every conversation, William and Emily reinforced their commitment to stand firm. even if the ground trembled beneath their feet. It was more than a personal struggle. It was a silent revolution, an invitation to rewrite the rules of what it meant to love, trust, and above all, belong. And so, amid the chaos, a love was born that refused to be extinguished, a love that carried the strength to transform not just their lives, but an entire system that wanted them apart. They were ready for battle. Together. The fine rain showed no mercy that afternoon, sliding down the dusty windows of the small car that took William and Emily back from the community where they had spent the day. Outside, the cobblestone streets blended with the shy glow of streetlights, while the smell of wet earth seeped through the slightly open windows. The air was heavy with unspoken words, doubts, and a growing sense that nothing would be easy from then on. Emily intertwined her fingers with his firmly, her gaze fixed on the road blurred by the storm. Her voice came out serious, almost whispered in the silence that enveloped them. "I don't know everything that lies ahead, William, but I know that together we can go further than either of us imagined." He looked at her, feeling the warm mix of protection and vulnerability that her hand conveyed. The truth hammered inside his chest, like the last spark in a fireplace about to go out. "You taught me the true meaning of courage, Emily. If that's the only thing I can lean on to keep from collapsing, it will have been worth it." In that promise, laden with glances and touches, there was the meeting of two worlds that until then seemed too distant. It was a silent pact, a fragile thread connecting a man haunted by the prejudices of his own circle and a woman accustomed to the daily challenges of the streets, where love is survival and struggle is constant. Meanwhile, in the glass tower of Carter Entertainment, the winds were blowing in another direction. Michael Thompson was developing his plans with the coldness of someone who saw a vulnerable prey. In closed meetings, sharing his doubts with hesitant board members, he built an invisible web of betrayals and illicit alliances. "Our CEO is not fit to lead." His voice was a venomous whisper in the cold corridors. "Imagine a commander without a firm hand in the midst of a storm. We need stability to ensure investor confidence." Even old friends of William, fearful that his name would be tarnished, began to retreat, leaving him almost alone in the battlefield. Isolation became a silent trap that consumed his strength, but his resilience had a name: Emily. Between the relentless demands of her mother, Mrs. Carter, who, even from the other end of the line, couldn't hide her fear and frustration, and the intense pressure of the market, William tried not to succumb. Every minute away from the communities he visited felt like an eternity, each board meeting a struggle against unattainable expectations. But it was the faces of those he encountered during his social work that nourished his soul and renewed his determination. Families marked by the scars of exclusion, cracked brick houses, children running barefoot, laughter and tears mingling with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee, warm bread, and the hope that still persisted. It was during one of these encounters that the idea emerged that could change the game. A corporate social responsibility project capable of changing the image of Carter Entertainment and, most importantly, making a difference in the lives of those who had never been heard within those luxurious walls. William and Emily dove together into building the proposal. She, deeply knowledgeable about real needs, brought vivid accounts, unplanned tears, faith, and original practices. He skilled in business diplomacy, aligned ideas and numbers, articulated strategies, and garnered support. During sleepless nights, surrounded by piles of papers and cups of bitter coffee, William confessed to Emily, his voice choked with exhaustion and emotion. "You're not just helping me create a project. You're showing me that leadership is, above all, about serving. And those who serve must have the courage to face the system." She smiled, the fatigue etched on her face illuminated by the glow of the computer screen. "And you've taught me that to truly serve, one must be willing to listen as much as to speak." When the day of the presentation finally arrived, William's heart raced as he walked down the corridor leading to the boardroom. That environment, dominated by men and women in suits, long surrounded by cold formalities and decisions drawn up in spreadsheets, felt like an arena where his last moves would be played in silence. Before he began, he cast a glance at Emily, who waited on the other side of the door, her invisible support. He took a deep breath and let his firm voice, driven by the desire for change, fill the space. As he presented the proposal, he noticed the lines of skepticism softening, the attentive eyes opening to the possibility of the new. The venomous questions that preceded the approval were answered with data, stories, and the simple passion of someone who believes that transformation is more than just a pretty word. When the last sentence echoed in the room, a silence hung in the air. It wasn't an immediate yes, but an opening, the seed sown in barren ground, which could still bloom. As they left the room hand in hand, feeling the weight of the battle they had fought, William and Emily knew that the road ahead would remain full of trials. Silent betrayals, meticulous investigations, and the relentless prejudice between the worlds they inhabited still awaited them. But they had also discovered that love, that resilient, stubborn, and vulnerable love, would be the most powerful weapon to confront the entire system that sought to keep them apart. United, they promised to stand firm, transforming not only the structures around them, but also themselves. In those intertwined steps, they walked not just as partners, but as silent revolutionaries, ready to rewrite the rules of belonging, trust, and above all, love. The night fell heavily over Chicago, enveloping the city in a cloak of lights and fragmented sounds. In the modest apartment where Emily lived, silence was a rare luxury, broken only by the constant hum of the fan and the distant sound of traffic that never slept. She sat at the small kitchen table, her face illuminated by the dim light of the lamp, as she reviewed documents from the social project they had presented. Her fingers traced invisible paths on the paper, trying to absorb the reality of the battle that materialized with each written paragraph. The phone vibrated, shattering the tranquil routine of the night. It was a message from William. "We can't let our guard down. They will try everything to bring us down, but we won't let them." Emily felt a knot in her stomach, a mix of fear and determination. She knew the path was far from a red carpet. The next day, the atmosphere at Carter Entertainment was tense. In the meeting room, Michael Thompson wore a frosty smile, casting calculating glances at the board members. The word of the day was investigation. The formal proposal to analyze William's finances and strategic decisions gained momentum, supported by 20 pages of veiled accusations and unfounded suspicions. Everything was carefully orchestrated to undermine his credibility. William received the news like a blow. Instead of retreating, a silent fury grew within him, mingling with a newly discovered courage. Deep down, he knew that this fight transcended any personal issue. It was about confronting a system that fed on fear, power, and the separation between classes. Emily, by his side, became not just a partner, but his strategic ally. She organized meetings, mobilized contacts, took the message to social media, giving voice to those who had previously been invisible. The community she frequented transformed into the true stage of that resistance. During a hurried lunch at a casual diner in the South Side, William vented, "Sometimes I feel like I'm fighting windmills, Emily, that all the power of money is against me, and this distance between my world and yours feels insurmountable." She smiled, a smile that mixed sweetness and challenge. "I've crossed much greater distances than this. If you want change, you have to be willing to learn what I already understand through experience." In that moment, the tension between them gave way to a deep complicity, a union that didn't rely on ease, but on the genuine desire to grow and build together. Meanwhile, Michael spared no effort. A closed dinner with critical investors served to stitch alliances that threatened to destabilize William even further. Whispers about future cuts, partial sales of the rumors of internal strife, and a possible removal of the main shareholder circulated through the marble corridors. But the unexpected happened on an ordinary morning. A homemade video, recorded in one of the communities supported by the non-profit project, went viral on social media. In it, children smiled, showed off makeshift toys, and thanked Carter for the support that was transforming their lives. The image reached not only everyday users, but also influential journalists who began to question the negative narrative surrounding the CEO. The fallout created a domino effect. The board, previously adamant about his removal, found itself divided. Some began to see the project as a real light that could save the company's image. Others tried to cover up the dirty play, while the outside world began to pressure for greater social responsibility. Amid this turmoil, William and Emily found rare and precious moments of peace. In a sunny park, surrounded by blooming trees, they exchanged smiles and confidences. William, still dressed in his disheveled tie, held her hand as if he had found a safe harbor. "I don't know what comes next," he said, his gaze distant, "but I know that with you by my side, I can face whatever comes." Emily squeezed his hand, feeling the warmth that connected them beyond words. "We're not just going to face it, we're going to change the game. Because love is this, the courage to go against everything and everyone." In that conversation, without grand gestures, they sealed a pact of strength and vision. It was no longer just about surviving, but about transforming. They were no longer just two individuals alone against the world, but a united front, a silent movement that was beginning to echo too loudly to be ignored. As time passed, Carter Entertainment prepared for a new decisive meeting. The future hung in the balance between internal betrayals, the collective strength of the neighborhoods, and the truth that was beginning to emerge, vibrant and impossible to silence. And William and Emily, increasingly intertwined by struggle and love, decided that they would not back down, because together they were finding not just courage, but the essence of a protagonism that transcended the barriers of class, fear, and loneliness. The path would be tortuous, filled with losses and improbable gains, but they knew that the only way out was to keep stepping firmly, transforming the ordinary into the extraordinary. And so, under the flickering light of that immense city, two insurgent hearts planned to rewrite the rules of love, trust, and power. The sun had barely risen on that grey morning when William received the call for the most awaited and feared meeting since the beginning of the crisis, the extraordinary board meeting of Carter Entertainment. Each word of the summons echoed like a hammer in his chest, awakening a mix of anxiety and determination that made his heart beat in an almost frantic rhythm. Upon entering the imposing room, adorned with mahogany panels and illuminated by a cold LED light, William sensed the charged atmosphere. Board members, dressed in impeccable suits, exchanged glances, some filled with disdain, others with apprehension. In the center of the table, a black briefcase rested, a silent symbol of the decision they would be forced to make. Emily was far away, immersed in the activity within the communities, organizing a group preparing for a peaceful demonstration in support of the recently approved social project. The connection between the two crossed the space, sustained by short messages, exchanged energies in furtive meetings, and the love that stubbornly resisted any storm. The board chair took the floor, his voice firm and calculated, trying to mask the unease that the habit of power could not quell. "We are facing a decisive moment for the company. The instability of our CEO puts the future of the organization at risk. We propose a vote for the immediate removal of William from leadership, aiming to preserve market confidence." A murmur swept through the room, some board members exchanging quick glances, whispering opposing opinions. Michael Thompson, as expected, stood up with an arrogant posture, emphasizing his speech. We need rigor and a firm hand. Mr. Carter, despite his history, has shown a fragility that could cost us dearly. I also propose a detailed investigation into the recent financial movements and strategic decisions." William felt the temperature rise in his body, adrenaline sharpening his senses. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them, the voice that emerged was firm, polished, but laden with contained emotion. "Before any judgment, I ask for the opportunity to present the project we have underway," and with a discreet gesture, he handed the participants a detailed report and the video that had gone viral on social media, where children and families thanked Carter for their support. The silence weighed heavily, and then the incisive questions began. Critical gazes, attempts to discredit what seemed pure and genuine. But in the middle of the room, the seed of doubt began to germinate. Some board members, inspired by that demonstration, began to advocate for the importance of incorporating social causes for the company's survival in the contemporary market. A long round of debates followed, sharp words and meticulously crafted arguments that made the clock advance mercilessly. In the end, the vote was tight, but enough for William to remain in his position under conditions: an expanded advisory board, rigorous oversight of finances, and the promise of consistent delivery of social project results. As he left the meeting, the weight that had oppressed him seemed to have lessened, even though the burden of responsibility increased exponentially. It was in the corridors that he felt Emily's hand envelop his, a simple gesture loaded with meaning. "You were incredible," she said, her voice low and firm, "not just as a leader but as a partner." William smiled, his eyes shining behind his glasses. For a moment, the noise of the world seemed distant, replaced by the sound of synchronized heartbeats. The following days brought a mix of hope and tension. The social project gained increasing visibility, awakening support from journalists, influencers, and an audience that saw in Carter a possible example of real change. In the communities, support manifested in warm hugs and eyes, shining with the promise of a less unequal future. But not everyone was willing to accept this transformation. Rumors of sabotage, leaks of information, and quiet campaigns to discredit William began to circulate in the shadows of the company. Emily felt this firsthand when, during a meeting with community representatives, she received an anonymous phone call with veiled threats. "They will try everything to tear us apart," she said, holding William's hand after hanging up. "But this is proof that we are on the right path." William nodded, squeezing her wrist as if to give courage to his own heart. In that moment, they knew that the love that united them was more than a refuge. It was the strength that propelled them to resist. The nights became short, marked by plans, strategies, and discussions. Emily, whose life had always been defined by hard work and the harsh reality of the neighborhoods, discovered a talent for oratory and mobilization that surprised everyone, including herself. William, increasingly unshackled from the chains of pride and fear, showed himself vulnerable and strong in a delicate balance. At an unexpected dinner, organized by allies emerging from civil society and progressive sectors of Carter, of whom he had apparently never heard, William made a silent toast to the uncertain future. "To those who are not afraid of risk, who fight against inequality with every fiber of their being, to those who believe in the power of love to rewrite lives." Emily smiled, her gaze reflecting the flame that never went out. "To our insurgent hearts." The path ahead would still be long, winding, and full of twists. But in a vibrant New York City, amidst the contradictions of a transforming society, two hearts stubbornly persisted, ready to show that courage and love could indeed break down walls and build bridges where there seemed to be only chasms. The days following the dinner were marked by growing tension. William felt the weight of the collective gaze, not only from the board or investors, but from an entire city that was beginning to watch every step he took with heightened scrutiny. In the streets of the South Side, where Emily worked, fervor and hope mingled with the latent fear of retaliation, for they knew that the system never surrenders without a fight to the end. Waking up before the sun rose became routine for both. He amidst spreadsheets, meetings and speeches, she organizing community gatherings, promoting discussion circles, and above all, keeping alive the pulsating heart of that movement that was already overflowing barriers. The coordination between the two functioned like an invisible choreography, made of quick glances, coded messages, and the firm touch that interrupted the rush to say, "I'm here." In the back office of Carter, William had his first encounter with raw reality: sabotage. A financial report, which initially seemed flawless, began to show inconsistencies when reviewed by his closest allies. Documents went missing, data was tampered with. The suspicion came clear and uncomfortable. Someone from the very board was betraying the project to ensure the definitive downfall of the problematic CEO. During a rainy night, as the drops traced streaks on the windows, William found Emily in the small kitchen of his apartment. She held a mug of tea, the aroma of herbs filling the stuffy air, and looked at him with a mix of concern and firmness. "Have you discovered anything?" she asked. He shook his head, his dark eyes filled with fatigue. "And it won't stop there," he said, his voice tense. "They will use everything within their reach to get me out of here. Even my weaknesses will be exposed, and I don't know how long I can hold out." Emily stepped closer, holding William's face with firm hands, her thumbs gently tracing his invisible scars. "I'm here," she replied without hesitation, "and I know you are stronger than you think. Strength is not just in holding on, it's in getting up every time they try to knock us down, and I will be by your side for that." After that declaration, nothing more needed to be said. That silence, which cannot be bought or faked, spoke deeper than any word. It was commitment. It was love defying the world. The attacks became more visible. Doubtful news popped up in headlines of newspapers and business websites, trying to associate William with illegal acts or mismanagement. On social media, anonymous profiles spread cruel rumors, some even mentioning his humble origins as if it were a flaw, an unacceptable stain for a businessman of his position. Emily felt the weight of these assaults in her chest, but she also drew strength from that toxic environment to reinforce her actions. At a community meeting, she held the microphone firmly as she spoke to an audience that saw her as the embodiment of possible change. "We will not allow a man who reaches out to help our children to be destroyed by those who have never set foot on these streets." Her voice, firm and clear, reverberated in that simple hall amidst laughter, tears, and applause. The impact of her speech went viral. She gained interviews on community radio and even on alternative television programs in New York, reigniting the flame of the struggle and exposing the contradictions of the corporate elite. As the storm of external resistance grew, William built his own network of allies within Carter. Those who believed in his social project, in real transformation, and in the values he and Emily defended, strengthened his position. In private conversations, they reported pressures to distance themselves, veiled threats, but also promised to stand firm. In a closed meeting, two advisors close to William confided, "This has turned into a war of two worlds. The problem is that we can no longer speak only of profit. Perhaps you are the change the company needs, but it will hurt for everyone to see." William took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility. "I'm not here to make things easier. I'm here to transform. Even if it hurts." It was the price of the silent revolution that was beginning to echo in every corner, from the hot asphalt of the streets to the cold halls of power. And in the heat of that battle, amidst plans and confrontations, William and Emily found a new courage that only love in conflict can awaken, strong, explicit, and silent at the same time, driving them to stand firm even when the ground threatened to crack beneath their feet. They were not fighting just for their own lives, but for every forgotten voice that was beginning to be heard. An invisible yet powerful legion that dared to dream and love fiercely against all odds to finally win. The light rain began to fall as William and Emily exited the Carter Entertainment Building, the shadows of the night swallowing the busy Fifth Avenue. The humid air carried the scent of the wet city, mixed with the intense aroma of fresh coffee coming from a small cafe on the corner. Despite the fatigue weighing on their shoulders, they both shared a silent restlessness, their hearts racing with the responsibility that brought them even closer together. "And then?" Emily asked, pulling the collar of her jacket, trying to shield herself from the cold and the insecurity that lingered. He let out a long sigh, his eyes, which used to carry a cynical glimmer, now reflecting a rare determination. "The board meeting was just the beginning of the real battle. They want a setback, Emily. The more conservative group has strengthened and is already plotting a new move to oust me." She held his hand. The strength emanating from those firm fingers was also a reminder that despite the uncertainties, they were not alone. "It's going to be a tough fight, but we know it's worth it." That night, the modest home where Emily lived, simple and welcoming, became the nerve center of strategic planning. Meetings with lawyers, mobilizing activists, and secret gatherings with digital influencers who supported the social project. It was a universe that seemed distant from the luxurious life William was used to, but where he found, with each step, a new and genuine strength. Days earlier, Emily had received alarming news. A hacker attack had attempted to compromise the Carter servers, seeking to expose confidential information to publicly discredit him. While the IT department raced against time to neutralize the threat, the couple discovered that the war extended beyond what they could see or hear. It was a silent battle, infiltrated in technological gaps and corridors of power. On a night when exhaustion threatened to overcome them, William and Emily took refuge on the balcony, overlooking the illuminated city, where the lights seemed to tell stories of lives connected by dreams and pains. The night breeze brought the freshness of hope, and he broke the silence. "I always thought I could conquer the world with money and strategy, but now I understand that the true conquest is this." He pointed to the horizon. "Respect, trust, the desire to change what many don't even dare to look at." She moved closer, resting her head on his shoulder, feeling the rhythm of their shared heartbeat. "It's about being human again, William, not the one who hides behind titles or privileges, but the one who gives of themselves without fear of being judged." The phone call shattered the serenity of the night. It was a board member notifying them of an emergency meeting scheduled for the next day, where a proposal for a temporary suspension would be discussed, based on mismanagement accusations raised by an influential group. The days that followed were a roller coaster of emotions and efforts. Emily expanded her network with community influencers, investigative journalists, and social leaders, while William reinforced his speech with new proposals to amplify the impact of the social project, anticipating every possible attack. Amid heated debates and moments of physical exhaustion, the chemistry between the two became more evident and vital. Every stolen touch, every shared glance, was a silent promise of persistence and support. On days when words failed, their bodies spoke. In moments when fear emerged, their embrace was the safe harbor. On a sunny morning, as they walked through downtown, William confessed, "I never thought the most powerful feeling I could experience would be fear, but it's the fear of losing everything and of not being enough to change the future." Emily smiled, her cheeks slightly flushed. "I was also afraid of not being enough. But I discovered that strength lies in unity." She intertwined her fingers with his, "in the courage to be vulnerable and still move forward." When the day of the emergency meeting arrived, the tension materialized in the room with leather chairs, glass walls, and bright white light that seemed to expose every weakness. William entered accompanied by Emily, who, although she didn't belong to that universe of expensive suits and scripted speeches, carried the glow of a warrior. The voices calmed only when the board president opened the session. William presented his report, the evidence of the social and financial impact of the project, as well as emotional testimonials from benefiting families. Cutting questions followed, some trying to destabilize him, others showing genuine doubts. In the midst of the discussion, an unexpected voice rose. Michael Thompson, who until then had been leading the attacks, surprised everyone by saying, "Perhaps we are facing a new model. The company can no longer ignore its social responsibilities. We need to think ahead, not just in numbers." The murmurs grew, and the vote ended with a narrow victory for William. The suspension was cancelled, but with the condition of greater transparency and external oversight of the projects. In the end, as the lights in the room dimmed, William and Emily left hand in hand. Outside, the first rays of sunlight pierced through the fog. In the early morning, illuminating a city that, like them, breathed hope and resilience. In that moment, nothing else mattered. They had learned, in the invisible battle and in explicit love, that true strength comes from the courage to start over, always together. The morning sun flooded the stained glass windows of Carter Entertainment with a golden, warm light, warming the cold corridors that had seemed like the stage of an invisible, silent, yet intense battle for weeks. William walked with firm, heavy steps, aware that every movement of his was being watched, weighed, and interpreted in countless ways. Beside him, Emily, dressed simply yet with an upright and confident posture, held tightly to a worn folder filled with documents, plans, and proposals that had become their armor against everything that sought to bring them down. Amid the rush of daily life, between negotiations and strategic meetings, an unexpected summons reached William, an invitation to a charity event in one of the city's most peripheral neighborhoods, organized by an emerging network of community leaders gaining prominence. It was a chance to get closer to those who already considered Emily and him symbols of a greater struggle. He hesitated for a moment, the skeptical businessman battling the uncomfortable desire to expose himself to what he would have previously dismissed as cheap populism. But Emily was firm, her words sharp against any doubt. "It's not just about image, William. It's about showing that those at the top can look down and understand, without arrogance, without fear. We cannot be just their voice, yours and mine." She looked into his eyes. "We must be their voice." Thus they accepted the invitation, and that warm and vibrant afternoon in Chicago, among food stalls and street vendors, the duo mingled with the people without distinction, exchanging smiles with children running barefoot in the square, inhaling the sweet scent of treats wafting through the air. The sound of an out-of-tune guitar and informal laughter created a welcoming soundtrack that contrasted with the accumulated tension in the offices of Carter Entertainment. William watched Emily in action, her voice light and firm, simple gestures transforming speeches into tangible promises. There was a new sparkle in his eyes, an emotion hard to contain. "I've never felt I could connect like this," he confessed, in a nearly hushed tone while holding her hand. She smiled, the wrinkles at the corners of her eyes highlighting the respect and sincere complicity. "Now you understand what I've always tried to show. It's not just charity, it's not just a social project, it's recognition, it's respect, it's truth." In that circle of conversations and sharing, ideas began to emerge that went beyond previously drawn boundaries. Local leaders expressed real needs, from schools lacking support to the absence of basic infrastructure. Emily took notes, determined to turn every word into concrete action. Back in the corporate reality, William felt the pressure mounting. The board had approved his continuation, but the conditions to stay were tight. In addition to external oversight, financial management was under rigorous scrutiny, and any slip-up would be enough to bring him down. It was in one of those tense meetings that Hector, one of the most influential board members, pointed at William with a cold gaze. "I don't want you to think I trust you blindly, William. This company has a reputation built with a lot of sweat, and we won't allow social experiments to put it at risk." The reprimand was like a sharp blade cutting through the newly gained trust, and William felt Emily's expectant gaze, who, with a subtle gesture, indicated for him to take a deep breath before responding. "This isn't about experiments," he replied, open, avoiding the rigidity of the past, "but about evolution. If we don't adapt, the future of Carter will be just a memory." He paused. "And I want us to be part of this evolution together, with transparency and responsibility." However, even with this statement, the shadow of doubt lingered. And it was amidst this storm that surprising news reached them. An exclusive partnership proposal was presented by an internationally respected non-profit organization interested in expanding the project, bringing investments and global visibility, a rare opportunity with the potential to solidify William and Emily's work definitively. Upon receiving the news, William and Emily looked at each other for a long moment, caught between excitement and fear of what it would mean. The prospect of expansion was tempting, but opening the doors to such a globalized world also meant exposing themselves further, facing criticism and intrigue on a much larger scale. That night, sitting in the room lit only by the timid glow of the television, William held Emily's hand as if seeking strength on the battlefield. "Do you think we're ready for this?" he asked, vulnerability slipping through his words. She squeezed his hand, their fingers intertwined firmly. "Being ready is a luxury we can't afford to wait for. What matters is that we are together, and when it's like this, we find a way to win." In the cozy silence, while the city slept outside, they knew that from then on, nothing would be easy. New doors were opening, filled with promises, of course, but also with risks. The international partnership would be the next great test of the courage, resilience, and love that, despite the stumbles and shadows, insisted on growing strong, carving a path through the darkness, a path that could only be walked by those willing to rewrite the rules, not just of power, but of destiny itself. And so, between hopes and fears, William and Emily prepared for the next step of that journey that was no longer just theirs, but of all those who believed that another world was possible, a world where social justice and love were not just dreams, but a reality to be achieved. The next morning had a grey sky that seemed to reflect the tension still lingering in the depths of Carter Entertainment. Fifth Avenue was slowly waking up, the hurried steps of pedestrians echoing between the skyscrapers that captured the weak morning light. Inside the office, the air was thick, charged with expectation. William, with his suit still damp from the fine drizzle of New York, walked with a serious expression, but in his eyes there was a faint glimmer of hope, the same hope that Emily had planted by his side, nurturing strength where there had once been uncertainty. Emily was already waiting for him in the conference room, an old folder tucked under her arm and a serious yet determined demeanor. She was clad in the simplicity of a light cotton blouse and worn jeans, a striking contrast to the contained luxury around them. But every gesture expressed the courage of those who carry more than paperwork. They carry dreams, lives, stories. "The official proposal has arrived," she said, sliding the sealed envelope across the mahogany table. "They want us to present our detailed plan next week at the launch of the partnership during a global event that will take place right here in New York City." William reached for the envelope, feeling the cold, impersonal texture of the high-quality paper, a symbol of formality and, paradoxically, the immense responsibility it imposed. "A step forward, but with risks," he murmured, looking out the window at the traffic slowly forming. "New York breathes very different lives, Emily. What we've built is still a small breath in the midst of this jungle," she smiled, conviction shining in her eyes. "And it is precisely this jungle that needs someone willing to fight for a new way of living. The proposal is not just a chance to grow, it's a chance to expand everything we've built together." The following days were marked by an almost obsessive routine of preparation. Outside the luxurious environment of Carter's offices, William found a parallel in meetings with representatives from the non-profit organization and community leaders, people whose long battles were etched in their skin and gaze, imparting to him a sense of urgency and humanity that seemed lacking in the glass palaces. Emily, always vigilant and attentive, became the beacon guiding William through the maze of meetings, revisions, and long nights of work. On one of those nights, while the hallway clock ticked close to midnight, they were immersed in a sea of papers when she spoke, her voice low and heavy with emotion that refused to be contained. "We can't forget what truly brought us here, William. It's not about investment or visibility. It's the faces of the people who are starting to believe that change is possible." He sighed, exhausted, running a hand over his face. "Sometimes it feels like I live in a limbo between two worlds, the luxury and the harsh simplicity. This duality consumes me, but it also drives me." The day of the presentation was a whirlwind of emotions. The auditorium sparkled, filled with representatives whose curious gazes were trapped by the need to see quick results, more than transformed lives. William and Emily faced the challenge of presenting something that transcended cold numbers and graphs, invisible to most eyes. William opened the speech, his voice firm and deep, looking beyond the faces, trying to reach the stories that had brought him there. "This company is not just a name, a brand. We are a collection of dreams and responsibilities. We believe that profit and social justice can walk hand in hand." Emily, her voice tinged with emotion, shared real experiences. Mothers who have seen their futures change. Young people who find in opportunities a way to break cycles. This is not charity, it's dignity. At the end, the applause was warm, filled with a rare mix of hope and surprise. However, the calm was merely apparent. Behind the scenes, resistance lurked. Some investors were skeptical, others saw a threat to the traditional model, to what had always defined success. Days later, in a nearly empty cafe, William found an anonymous email containing a link to a report accusing the partner non-profit of irregularities in contracts, initiating a stealth campaign to undermine the entire project. When he showed the message to Emily, she did not hesitate. "They will try everything to bring us down, but this battle is ours alone, and we are in this together." In that simple gesture, hands firmly intertwined, there was more than comfort. There was the resolve that even in the darkest shadows, the light of commitment could be the only way out. They spent the night drafting responses, contacting lawyers, and preparing clarifications for communication channels, aware that the next move would be decisive. For the first time, William understood that true power was not just in the boardrooms, but in the courage to be transparent, even when it revealed weaknesses. And so, in the fast-paced and turbulent pulse of the city that never sleeps, while New York breathed in its high and low corners, William and Emily marched side by side, carrying with them the certainty that true victory is not in figures, but in the ability to resist, to love, and to not give up, even when the world insists on showing the opposite. There, in the heart of a metropolis buzzing with contradictions, two insurgent hearts beat strongly, challenging old stories, paving the way for a future yet to be written. Night fell over New York City like a heavy curtain, muffling the sounds of the city that never sleeps. In the modest apartment where they believed they could find a bit of peace, William and Emily faced each other in silence, the hours racing against them as the computer screens projected mind maps, unanswered messages, and carefully crafted strategies. The weight of recent accusations turned the air into something dense, almost suffocating, but it also ignited a resilient flame in the hearts of the duo. "We can't let..." Emily's voice was firm, but tinged with the weariness that dawn brings. "They want to turn our struggle into a circus. People need to know the truth, every detail, total transparency." William agreed, running his hands through his hair. He had never imagined that the journey he had embarked on would lead him to such exposure, such vulnerability. We need to call a press conference, show everything, open the spreadsheets, the reports, the meetings. There should be no room for lies. She nodded, her gaze resolute. Exactly. Those who have something to hide fear the light. We do not. The days that followed were a whirlwind. William, accustomed to boardrooms and cold negotiations, found himself in front of cameras, flashes, and tense interviews. Emily, almost like a warrior, answered questions with a mix of passion and pragmatism. Together, they retraced every step of the project, presenting documents, testimonies, and evidence of each milestone achieved. However, behind the scenes, opposing forces continued to act. An influential group within the board, led by Hector, began maneuvers to undermine William and Emily's credibility in a dangerous game of heavy-handed tactics that threatened to collapse months of work. "Do you really think you can contain this storm?" Hector asked in a closed-door meeting, his gaze sharp. William remained calm, but inside he felt the intensity of the challenge. "I haven't dealt with defeat to start now. People expect us to do the right thing, even in adversity." Amid heated meetings and whispers in the hallways, Emily found refuge in her daily visits to the community center, where familiar faces and stories of resilience gave her strength not to sink. During one of these gatherings, while participating in a discussion circle, she heard the voice of Maria, a young mother with 3 children who wore a resilient smile. "You've given me hopes I didn't even know I had," she said, her eyes glistening. "My husband lost his job, my daughter's health is declining, but now I feel like I can breathe, that there are people fighting alongside me." Emily's heart was pierced by her words, reminding her that what remained was this: the power to touch lives, even when everything seemed to conspire against them. Back at Carter Entertainment, William had a decisive conversation with Michael Thompson, the former enemy who was now an unexpected ally. "I heard about the latest developments," Michael said, his tone grave yet sincere. "You're not alone in this. Internal politics are dirty, but there are those who believe in what you want to do." William looked at him, reluctant, but recognizing the importance of that bridge. "So tell me, how do we keep hope alive in the face of pressure?" Michael smiled sadly. "Rarely do changes come without intense struggle. The secret is not to lose your essence along the way." Meanwhile, Emily and William planned an open event where beneficiaries of the project could share their stories of transformation. The idea was for the city to see and hear what the powerful were trying to silence. On the day of the event, Times Square was buzzing. Simple stalls sold chocolate truffles and soups, the warm aroma mingling with that of resilient flowers despite the concrete. People of all ages gathered, many wearing worn clothes but sporting a sparkle in their eyes that went beyond fatigue. William stepped onto the small makeshift stage, observing the crowd that was not made up of investors but of ordinary people. The same people who had fueled his dreams and were now coming forward to reaffirm them. "Today we are not here to talk about business, but about connections," he began, swallowing his emotion, while Emily beside him held his hand firmly. Testimonies followed, voices narrating everyday victories. A child spoke of dreaming of becoming a doctor. An elderly woman shared how she had returned to school. A young man talked about the job he had secured. Each word was a brick in the construction of a new reality. However, even in the face of this festival of hope, William felt the shadow of danger lurking. Power and fear never slept as deeply as they seemed to at that moment. But he and Emily knew that this was just the beginning of a broader fight, a war of resistance against the darkness of complacency and indifference. There in that vibrant and contradictory civilization called New York City, 2 hearts, filled with scars and dreams, beat strongly, ready to face all opposing winds, for they had discovered that true love does not surrender. It fights, survives, and transforms. and to the distant sound of cars and voices, a silent promise echoed between them. No matter how hard the road was, they would never be alone. The lights of Times Square began to dim, and the crowd that had gathered there slowly dispersed, taking with them the sweet scent of chocolate truffles and the vibrant feeling of belonging. William and Emily remained on the makeshift stage for a while longer, watching the last figures still sharing stories and smiles around the simple stalls. The shadows of night advanced over the city, but for them, that darkness no longer seemed so threatening. "It was an important day," Emily said, taking off her light jacket as the cool breeze caressed her skin. "They saw that we are not alone, that this struggle has a face, a voice, a life." William nodded, feeling his heart still racing from the intensity of the moment. "Yes, I think I've never felt so connected to what truly matters." They walked together through the wet cobblestone streets, amidst the echoes of the last hurried footsteps and the distant murmur of traffic. The city seemed to breathe its own rhythm, between hopes and challenges, a chaotic symphony that, for them, gained a new meaning. In the days that followed, the impact of the event at Times Square reverberated throughout New York City. Newspapers and digital media highlighted the initiative, and social media was flooded with genuine videos and testimonies, many of them shared spontaneously by the people. Common people. The visibility, however, did not ease the tension behind the scenes. Hector and his faction continued to move their pieces, seeking ways to regain lost ground. On a day thick with clouds, William received an unexpected call. On the other end was Sarah, an investigative journalist known for her integrity and courage. "I've heard about what you all are facing," she said, her tone serious. "I want to help tell this story. Off the record, away from the official spotlight." "That's exactly what we need," William replied, hesitant but with a glimmer of hope. "Someone who can show the truth without filters." Arranging a meeting at the casual diner on the corner of Fifth Avenue, William and Sarah talked at length over sips of bitter coffee and the constant murmur of urban life. She shared her doubts and the dangers involved in exposing a system rooted in interests and vanity. "If this is really right, and you all are willing, we can turn the tide," she said, looking at William. "But it won't be easy. The financial mafia has long fingers and watchful eyes." Meanwhile, Emily intensified community actions, strengthening ties and building support networks that operated both emotionally and practically. An unexpected call from David, a childhood friend, brought crucial assistance, a free space for the workshops that were now multiplying. "I don't have much, but what little I can offer is for you guys," David said, his warm voice crossing the line. "I know how much we need a safe place." On a golden late afternoon, Emily visited the new space. The cheerful walls and wide windows allowed sunlight to pour over tables filled with notebooks, pencils, and dreams. "This is just the beginning," she whispered, feeling her eyes well up. As the pressure mounted, William and Emily strengthened their alliance even further. It was not just the cause that united them, but the love that grew in the margins of challenges, in the silent complicity of small victories, and even in the controlled tears during moments of vulnerability. In that love, they found the strength to carry on. On a cold night, while reviewing documents about the partnership with the international non-profit organization, William finally broke the silence that had accompanied him since the beginning. "You know, I thought power was armor. Now I see it's a prison. True strength lies in being vulnerable." Emily smiled, her eyes shining. "And yet you haven't given up." "No, because I have you by my side," he replied, intertwining his fingers with hers. The horizon remained uncertain, battles still to be fought, and risks always present. But William and Emily had understood what many took time to see, that the greatest power resided in that resilient love, capable of transforming and enduring. And so, New York City continued its ebb and flow, a vast stage where the drama of life unfolded at every corner, in every courageous gesture. Two hearts beat in unison in the vastness of that unequal universe, writing a story, not of perfection, but of struggle, hope, and true love that would echo beyond time. And you, where are you in this world? Tell us in the comments which city you are watching from and rate this story from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very valuable. Leave a like and subscribe to the channel to receive more exciting stories like this.